Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Friday. That means it's time to deploy. My name's John, and joining me as always is Jim. Jim, how are you? How are you this week?
This week, pretty good this week. Getting ready to go on holidays. Battling away one-handed though. I've sliced the end of my finger off this morning cooking breakfast, so leaning on co-pilot heavily today as I type one-handed.
I like it. It can't help you make breakfast, but it can certainly help you make code. Awesome.
Yeah,
What happened? Were you slicing something?
yeah,
Well,
slicing
obviously.
up slicing up some spring onions and just yeah, lost the
Oh, well,
tip. We'll see.
yeah. All right. Well,
Yep.
hopefully it's not too serious. Anyways, for those of you stumbling upon this show, this is the show where Jim and I talk a little bit about the tech trends that were for the week, including everything that was going on relative to Octopus Deploy. If you need to find out more, you can visit our website, which is over at octopus.com. I'll go ahead and share my screen. We'll have a conversation about some of the things that happened this week. So I've mentioned it always. I'll mention again, octopus.com is our website. You can go check it out if you're all curious. Um, we've got all kinds of updates there as well. Our blogs are there. We have some new webinars that have been posted about, including one that we did last week, which was our community's town hall. We've got the next one scheduled for the end of this month. So July 26th, the next one is coming up. You can also check out James talking about the art of balancing cloud and on-prem deployments on the 13th. So that's coming up pretty quick. And if you're all curious, you can go watch the previous town halls / webinars that are listed below. So that's at octopus.com/webinar. So make sure to go check that out if you have a chance. So rounding out some of the news, we have a new version of Visual Studio. So Visual Studio Code, I should be more precise. So Visual Studio Code, the team has got this kind of, I think, friendly co-opetition going with the TypeScript team. So there seems to be a release every month, and the VS Code team is working diligently away on various versions. So the latest version, which is for June 2023, version 1.8, features a bunch of improvements around accessibility, better support for things like tab resizing, etc. This is all kind of workspace related. Skip subverbs when expanding selection. So this is for the code inline experience. Terminal image support. So if you want to view your images inline, you can go ahead and do so now, which is awesome.
That is great.
There's some cases where you want to do that. Obviously, better support for Python extensions. Remote connections via the Windows subsystem for Linux. So WSL allows you to do some interesting sort of scenarios there relative to Linux. A preview of GitHub Copilot to create a workspace / workflow. So being able to scaffold projects pretty quickly. And then finally, rounding out the thing that we announced a couple of shows ago, the C# dev tool, the dev kit extension. They're adding new support around documentation and things of the like for supporting that. So again, that's the latest release of Visual Studio Code. This is version 1.8. Just keeps plowing away, I guess, on the features, which is great. So I know you're not using it, Jim. I know you're a writer guy.
I would love to be using Visual Studio, to be honest. Visual Studio Code. Yeah, the reason I feel like I would struggle is some of the heavy C# refactoring that Rider provides.
Right.
But yeah, the stuff that they do with and also the unit test runner, to be honest. It was interesting to see that the Python support's really good, and they've improved that because the Python support for unit testing is amazing, and I don't understand why it's not as good for .NET. But at the end of the day, it's the remote tooling stuff, that remote connection stuff that they've improved with WSL that really excites me about Visual Studio Code. I think that's a killer feature.
As the cool kids say, WSL, I guess.
Yeah, WSL.
Or WSL. Windows subsystem for Linux. So yeah, obviously there's lots of reasons to be using your editor of choice. I mean, who am I to say which is better, but cough, Vim, I guess. But yeah, so lots of choice there. And I think one of the things that is compelling to me around VS Code, probably the most compelling thing about VS Code itself, is the fact that you see this march, the Bataan death march of updates coming from the team all the time. Yeah. So that's great to see. And kudos to them for continuing to ship that. There is also the insiders stream. There's an insiders build that you can also get access to. And if for those who aren't aware, you can get access to that directly through the website. So you can download both the stable and insiders builds available directly from code.visualstudio.com. So if you want to live on the bleeding edge, you can go ahead and do so. And that also includes extensions. Extension support for experimental builds, etc. Insider builds also is supported as well. So if there's an extension you like to use, that's part of the game there as well. I think that's one of the killer features of VS Code is the extension marketplace. That's really for me what makes it shine. So there you go. So VS Code. All right, this is GitLab. GitLab's got a lot of new innovations. They've recently released version 16. 16.1 is actually out now, and there's a lot of new capabilities built into version 16. I think the big when I watched the webinars around GitLab, it was highly focused around the AI capabilities. They have a solution similar to Copilot. It's called Duo. So GitLab Duo is the version of sort of like Copilot, this code generation tool based on an LLM. So this is an article entitled "Beautifying Our UI, Giving GitLab a Build Features a Fresh Look." I found this one interesting, obviously, because of the fact that we sit in pipelines all the time with regards to deployment and such. And so one of the nice capabilities with GitLab, obviously, is the ability to render out pipelines. And so they have a pipeline execution context. And so this is what the old one used to look like. So if I can bring up a bigger version of this. So this is what it used to look like. You would have a title, you'd have the ability to retry, you'd have the pipeline itself, the series of steps or jobs that would occur as part of that, whether there's parallel execution or whatnot. And now they've simplified that. So now it looks something to like this. So the idea is that they're trying to bring some of that data forward. It's a bit of a refinement, but you can see pipelines running in context, which you could before. It'll show you the jobs. It will show you the build or change request rather that went into kicking off that pipeline. They talk a little bit about those changes. They also are adding things like badge consistency with link styles, etc. So the old version here, new vision underneath. This is all aligned to their beautifying UI task that they have. The thing about GitLab that I like a lot is they have a very public roadmap and very public sort of approach to the way in which they're refining their product. Not to say that their competitors like GitHub aren't also public. There's actually a roadmap for GitHub as well. And incidentally, we have our own roadmap as well, if you're at all inclined. But these and other changes are listed here in their sort of beautifying section. This one I like a lot. So this one is basically when you execute a workflow via a runner. So runners are basically the machines that perform your workflows. So this will run remotely. And you can do this with GitHub today, where you see this terminal-like window displaying messages that come up. This is a feature where they can now link the execution runner to the jobs that are associated with that actual workflow. So you see over the right-hand side here, it gives you the label here. So number 26 with a hash and the name of the runner that's executing it. So these and other changes have been added to the UI, and they're basically trying to make it a better story going forward, which I'm all in favor of. Anytime I can hear more about how the product's getting better, I'm a huge fan of.
I think it's really easy to overlook, the size of the problem that's being solved here, right? Like these are really complex UIs that we're going to deal with. There's a lot of information. We were just talking last week about how GitHub's improving their UI, right? Makes me jealous. I spent a lot of time in a build tool that won't be named that I don't even know how to get around the UI, to be honest.
Cough, cough. It starts with rhymes with Eam City, I guess. So no, we love Team City. It's all good. But yeah, our pipelines are enormous. JetBrains, they're well aware that we push Team City to the max. I don't think it's any secret that we use Team City, by the way.
I don't know.
I think folks know that. So yeah,
I just didn't want to directly.
That's me. Blame me. It's fine. It's fine. Look, I get blamed for everything. It's fine. It's okay. So I look. We're always. No tool is perfect. And I think that, like to your point, right? Rendering pipelines like this is hard. Yeah. And when you're executing as many pipelines as we have, I would expect the tool to have problems. So not problems, but, like scaling a UI is a difficult task. So, we use it because we like it. So there you go. This is another article from the folks over at GitLab, how to automate the creation of GitLab runners. So when going to execute your workflows or your jobs, basically, you need to obviously provision runners. This is something you can do in GitHub as well. You do this via YAML. You define the name of the runner. You can also stand up your own runners, by the way. So if you want to run your own infrastructure within your, for execution context with GitHub Enterprise, for example, you can totally do that. This is an article that talks about how to automate the creation of runners via GitLab. And so it kind of talks a little bit about that, how you might want to provision these things. Gives me an example here of 2 runners running inside a local network here. So this is a big thing about GitLab, is that they're very much about the privacy element of it. So for those folks who live in public repos, open source, yay, it's all free, man. That's GitHub. For folks who are more on the corporate side, we don't want to share contacts, etc. We want to keep everything kind of hidden, which is fine. That's like, that's totally legitimate reasons for doing that. I think GitLab is where they're positioning themselves. And you see this within their webinars, right? So their latest release webinar where they talked about GitLab 16, and particularly the innovations they did around AI and ML, and they talk about Duo. They talk about how they don't share your source code with an LLM. It's not a general LLM, so you won't see your source code leak out in like code suggestions, for example. I think I've seen tweets where people have said, "Hey, I wrote that," and like it's showing up somewhere else in someone else's code suggestion. So, anyways, all that being said, is if you're wanting to stand up your own runners via GitLab and automate the process by which you will do that, this is an article that talks a little bit about how to do that. And so being able to automate the installation and registration of runners, this is done via Bash. So here's a Bash script on how to do that. Obviously, you have to curl some things, and then apt-get, and then GitLab runner is the CLI for registering runners. So pretty easy to understand. I mean, a lot of these systems are kind of the same in terms of the way that they're made up, etc. So I wouldn't anticipate if you're on one, you would have trouble with the other. Awesome.
Nice.
Deno is a JavaScript runtime, very popular for folks who care about security and robustness, etc. This has been under the auspices of Ryan Dahl, who's the original creator of Node. And Deno is now available. 1.35 is shipped. And what they've added here is they've stabilized the API around deno.serve, which allows you to basically stand up a web server. So if you're at all interested in doing request response via HTTP, deno.serve is now a long-awaited API that is now stable. So this was the big thing that I think a lot of folks wanted out of Deno, the ability to stand up and provision a web server via HTTP. And so the serve function is now available, and they obviously do their best to try and sell it to you. So they provide comparison graphs in terms of performance with other runtimes, namely Node in this case. And so you can see how well it's doing there. They've added a bunch of other facilities and improvements and Node compatibility. So that's something that you can check out if you're all inclined. So Deno 1.35 is now available. A fast and convenient way to build web servers. So yeah, there you go.
That's something I've checked out, Deno. I've heard great things.
Yeah, they've recently added support for Node package management integration. So that was the big thing that was missing. The big thing with Node is like people like Node. It's fine, great runtime. But NPM is really the reason why I think a lot of people choose Node, is that I can just NPM install whatever, and away I go. And Deno, for the longest time, didn't have compatibility with NPM until recently. So they now support that. And so you can now pull down packages. That was the big sort of thing I think that slowed adoption initially with Deno, is that NPM compatibility wasn't there. But now that it is, I think it's kind of like, okay, let's go. So there you go. So if you're looking for a better environment relative to hosting applications vis-a-vis Node, maybe Deno might give you a leg up. Let's jump over to this one over here. I thought this one was fun. I just saw this right before we started the show. This is a repository up on GitHub called Rejected GitHub Profile Achievements. So for those who don't know, if you go to your profile, let's take a risk here and go to mine. This should be interesting. So you have this little section here for achievements. These are basically things that you earn as you do things in GitHub. And so this is a obviously fictitious or facetious homage to those achievements. These are rejected GitHub profile achievements. So you have the vital contributor, over 100 issue comments consisting of a +1 or thumbs up emoji. I would definitely fall in that camp. Sith Lord, wipe out someone else's commits by force pushing to the main branch. Ah, yes. Procrastinator, create a repository with a single init commit with just a readme.md and never touch it again for 5 years. Perfect. Secret Santa, accidentally commit a secret API key in a public repo. I have done this once. I have done this. Monkey Wrench, make a commit directly to the main branch that breaks the build process. I have done that as well. I would have all these achievements, by the way.
Yeah.
This is fine. Over 1,000 open issues on public repositories you own. I don't have 1,000. I'm probably in the hundreds, but definitely not the thousands. Arborist, maintain a repository that has at least 150 branches merged but never deleted. You know, that's something you can turn on pretty easily within a repo. Like, that's just lazy. You can automatically delete branches once they've been merged. Teehee, in a single minor cleanup commit to the main branch, change every line of every file in the repository so that all open pull requests are unmergeable. Wow. I'm not that sadistic. There you go.
Yeah. It happens.
So the list, just a lot of stuff in here, obviously. So yeah,
I can see a Chrome extension in this. Like,
that's
I would
right.
like to see this happen.
Sure, I like this one. I thought this was good. So it would be interesting if GitHub gave sort of the demotivators I like in these two.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's their next April Fool's joke. People still
sure.
doing those.
I think that's a great suggestion. So hey, GitHub, if you're watching, come on, get on it. Improved source generators and code fixers arrive in .NET Community Toolkit 8.2.1. So the .NET Community Toolkit is a set of extensions available up on NuGet, and it provides a whole set of libraries that are UI agnostic, platform agnostic. So they'll run on Mac, Linux, Windows, anywhere basically .NET runs. And they are prefixed with the namespace Community Toolkit, and these are general helpers, etc. And so what they've added is support for improved source generators, which are source generators are injected at runtime via the JIT process, and they're utilized for injecting code within your execution. Code fixers are, basically resolutions for when you're doing analysis on code. So they've added some support there. So they answer the question that I was just answering, which is, what is the .NET Community Toolkit if you haven't seen before? So these are some of the more common namespaces you'll see, or libraries in this case. So they have a new analyzer and code fixer for relay command. So the relay command basically allows you to set up and provision asynchronous methods, and then it provides an interface for resolving that. And so they give you an analyzer and code fixer around that, and then they add a bunch of other changes and improvements to the framework itself. So there you go. A little quick one, but for those folks who don't know anything about .NET Community Toolkit, this is definitely something you can check out. Sticking with .NET for the moment, improvements to the caching abstraction in ASP.NET Core. So for those who don't know, there is a reusable extension method for distributing caching in ASP.NET. This one is utilizing a .NET 8 and is using Redis as the backend for a distributed caching mechanism for ASP.NET Core applications. And so the idea here is that distributed caches aren't a new thing. They've been used for many, many years. But they are highly effective of doing things that are difficult to do, which is, i.e., sharing cache, items that are in cache across different nodes within your network. And so they showed a code example here, which is showing one that integrates with Redis. And of course, there are services provided by Azure for this capability as well. So at the bottom here, I think they mentioned the fact that they show you a bunch of code examples here, but then they show you they make reference here to improving your web application performance via Azure Cache for Redis. So this is something that you can also take advantage of as well if you are so inclined. So distributed caches, I assume you're an expert at these, aren't you, Jim? Right? This is something that you have no problem with.
What's the phrase, like? Two hard problems: naming and caching.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely in that space. So caching is definitely a hard problem. And I would argue that scheduling is one of the hardest problems I've ever encountered in computer science. So
Yeah.
scheduling is gnarly to me.
Yeah.
It's something that I've had troubles with. So, anyways, this is another article that I saw. This is again from our friends over at JetBrains, mastering Git and GitHub in just 5 hours. So, if you have half a day available and you want to know everything that is Git, I saw a great joke the other day. It was on Twitter. He's like, I messed up my Git branch and now my Git tree looks like Guitar Hero. So it's like you can make these things look really bad. But if you're at all curious as to how you get your hands dirty with Git, GitHub, if you don't even know what Git means or what it is we're talking about, this is probably something that you can start with. I know that Microsoft Learning has done some things around this as well. So these are great resources. These ones that I think this is the scenario where people are like everything you want to know about Git, but we're too afraid to ask. And I think oftentimes we kind of fall into a pit of success where we're like, I don't really know what's going on here. I just know how to do like add and remove and check out, and that's it. Like forget cherry picking. I'm just gonna go ahead and like just get the code in any way I can. I understand branches vaguely. So I think if you're at all curious about how Git works, how you might want to use it in the context of GitHub, how you might want to leverage the commands that are there, I would argue first start with the CLI. Don't use the UIs that are out there. Git Kraken, the GitHub client, those are great. Don't get me wrong. I use Git Kraken myself. But if you really want to understand how kind of Git works and see all the gnarly parts and pieces, start with the CLI. But this is a course from the folks over at JetBrains that talks about how to use Git and GitHub, how to install and set up the client, the common commands, and then working with local and remote repositories. I like this. I think something like this is desperately needed, especially in our industry where people are too often embarrassed to admit that they don't know something.
Yeah. It's just one of those tools. Like there's a few of them in the constellation of tools we have to use as a developer that you can get by just sort of like running into enough stuff. But if you take the time to understand this one, boy, it's powerful, and boy, you'll feel so much better every day using it if you take the time. And there's a couple that just are too complex to learn by osmosis, I think.
Yep. Git's definitely up there in terms of complexity. I would argue Kubernetes is definitely up there in terms of complexity. There are some other ones as well. The Go module system before I think version 1.10 was pretty complex. So there's definitely some parts and pieces that are a bit gnarly. So, but there are resources out there that will help you get your hands dirty with this, and this is just one of them. So thanks to the folks over at JetBrains for making this available. That's awesome. I know you're a fan of the task manager in Windows. You often create programs that run wild, don't you, Jim? You got to kill some processes.
It happens, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So Dave from Dave's Garage here, this is the original author of the Windows Task Manager. And so in this YouTube video, David Plummer here talks about how when he was at Microsoft and back in the mid to late 90s, he was the guy responsible for creating the Windows Task Manager that we all know and love today. So this was introduced back in, I believe, Windows NT 4. Probably was in 3.5.1, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you remember Windows 98, but the Task Manager there was like so basic, and you had nothing available. And so I like the Task Manager. I don't know about you, but as soon as I could see like CPUs loaded and how much memory pressure there was, and I could remotely and locally shut down processes, for example, view my networking, all that stuff. This felt to me like, okay, good. At least they were listening to the folks over at Sysinternals to create a tool that is meaningful. So this is a video from David that talks about, the motivations that went into this. So the challenges along the way, things that he did. So this is a video that I would highly recommend. This is up on YouTube, as I said before. And he talks about the evolution of the task manager as it pertains to Windows 10, Windows 11, etc. It's gotten pretty cool now. I like it a lot. I think what they're doing is they're borrowing features from other environments like Parallels and VMs, VM hosting environments where people were remotely connected to virtual processes, and they were looking at like, what is my memory pressure? What's my CPU looking like? And they kind of integrate those in Task Manager. So this is a video that I found quite interesting.
Yeah. That's how you tell you're getting value for money out of your new multi-core machine, right? You're looking at
That's
Task
right.
Manager.
One CPU's pegged and everything else is just sitting like throwing pencils in the ceiling. It's like that. It's like that meme you see of city workers. One guy's digging and the rest are all watching. So
Yep.
there you go. Yeah. It's the old joke that I like from a buddy of mine, Richard Campbell. He's like, Windows Outlook or Microsoft Outlook has 84 threads open and none of them are for you. You know, they're all for none of them are fetching mail. This is another video I thought you would like. This is I created Clippy. So if you're at all a fan of Clippy, this is from the person who created it.
Oh wow.
And yeah, talking about Microsoft Bob and talking about the motivations that went into Clippy. And so if you're at all interested about hearing about the history of that, this is available from the folks over at Great Big Story. They do a number of great videos around the background of technology, etc. And so this is an interview with the guy who invented it. I think his name is Kevin. And he talked about how they did like user testing with it and all that. And so, you know, the fact that they landed on a Clippy, a piece of clip art like this was no accident. People liked the clip, the little chip there. So yeah, that's kind of the motivation
That is
behind
one
it.
I
Long
want
live
to watch.
Clippy.
Yeah.
Yes, with its dead soulless eyes. So yeah, if you're all curious, that's again also open up on. Oh, sorry, available up on YouTube, and so definitely worth checking that out there. And so that about wraps it up for this edition of Deploy on Friday. A little bit of a shorter one, but that's okay. We had a 4th of July to contend with, so not as much news this week as other weeks. But we will be here next week and the week after, and the week after that, deploying software constantly. That's why we're calling this Deploy on Friday. And Jim, any final words before we wrap up this week's broadcast?
No, nothing comes to mind. That was great.
All right, you got a new dog. You should tell folks about Moose.
Moose. Where is he? He's not here. I won't yell into the microphone to get him. He'll be making.
Jim's got a new dog, so
he's
a big burly dog. Maybe we'll see him on the next episode. Anyways, on behalf of Jim and the rest of us over at Octopus, thanks for joining. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Deploy on Friday. Take care.